I never thought my marriage would end like this. For years, I had been the quiet, patient husband, the kind of man who tried to fix things, even when they were clearly beyond repair. But that night, as I watched Rebecca applying her lipstick in the mirror, I knew we had reached the point of no return. "Are we going somewhere?" I asked, my voice calm despite the storm brewing inside me. Rebecca didn't even hesitate. She met my gaze through the mirror, her expression filled with nothing but mild irritation. "No," she said flatly. "I'm going out. I have a date." I expected the words to hit me like a truck, but they didn't. Maybe I had already seen this coming. Maybe deep down, I had known for a long time that she had checked out of this marriage. But knowing it and hearing it out loud were two different things. I stood there, my mind racing, but I refused to react the way she wanted me to. She was expecting rage, begging, maybe even some desperate attempt to hold on. Instead, I simply nodded. "No," I said finally, my tone even. That made her turn around. She crossed her arms, irritation flashing across her face. "No, what? You're not going out on a date. Not while we still live under the same roof." Rebecca scoffed. "Oh, grow up, Daniel. I can do whatever I want. If you don't like it, that's your problem." I exhaled slowly, keeping my patience in check. "Fine," I said. "Then pack your things and find somewhere else to stay. If you want to see other people, you can do it from your own place." She laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. "I'm not going anywhere. I like this house. And when I divorce you, I'll make sure I get the biggest share when we sell it." That was it. That was the moment I knew there was no saving this. "Do us both a favor," I said, my voice firm. "Go stay with your parents until this is over. You're the one who wants out, not me." She smirked, a glint of cruelty in her eyes. "Oh, I'll be back in 30 minutes, she said. "You'd better not be here when I get back, or I'll call the police. I'll tell them you threatened me, maybe even hit me. You know how it works. They'll hold you for 48 hours, and by then, I'll have changed the locks." A cold anger settled in my chest. She really thought she had all the power. She thought I would roll over and let her win. "You're making a mistake," I said, my voice dangerously calm. She rolled her eyes and turned back to the mirror, muttering about fixing her lipstick. I walked out of the room, my mind already forming a plan. If Rebecca wanted to play dirty, I could adapt. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't storm out of the house in defeat. Instead, I sat in the living room, sipping a glass of whiskey as I watched the clock tick down the 30 minutes Rebecca had given me. She thought she had won. She had no idea what was coming. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. Not anymore. She wanted to play dirty? I was about to show her what real strategy looked like. While she was gone, I got to work. The first thing I did was secure my financials. I had been smart over the years, keeping a separate bank account she didn't know about. I transferred most of my savings there, leaving just enough in our joint account to avoid suspicion. Then I contacted my lawyer. "It's time," I said simply. She knew exactly what I meant. We had been preparing for this moment for weeks, ever since I started noticing Rebecca's strange behavior. Late nights, secret phone calls, and that unmistakable air of contempt she carried around me. I moved on to the next step, securing the house. I changed the access code to the security system and made sure all the important documents, our house deed, car titles, insurance policies, were locked away in my office safe. A safe that only I had the combination to. By the time Rebecca's car pulled back into the driveway, I was more than ready. She strutted into the house with an air of victory, tossing her purse onto the counter. "You're still here?" she said, her voice laced with amusement. I took another sip of whiskey and set the glass down slowly. "Yeah," I said. "I decided I'm not going anywhere." She frowned, clearly not expecting that response. "Did you not hear what I said earlier?" she asked, placing her hands on her hips. "Oh, I heard you just fine," I replied, and I decided to make a few moves of my own. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. "What are you talking about?" I leaned forward, resting my arms on my knees. "You know, Rebecca, for years you've played games with me, manipulated, controlled. Thought you were always one step ahead. I let a small smirk tug at the corner of my lips. But not this time. She scoffed, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. You're bluffing. I stood up, walked over to the counter, and slid a single envelope toward her. Open it. She hesitated but eventually picked it up. The moment she saw the contents, her face paled. What the hell is this? Divorce papers, I said simply. Filed, processed, and as of this morning, my lawyer ensured that all my assets are protected. Rebecca's eyes darted across the room, as if looking for a way out. You can't just do this. I chuckled. Oh, but I already have. She slammed the papers onto the counter. This isn't over. I took another sip of my whiskey. It is for me. Rebecca stood there, gripping the divorce papers so tightly her knuckles turned white. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out her next move. For years, she had controlled the narrative, bending situations to her advantage. But now she was backed into a corner, and she knew it. You think you're so clever, don't you? She hissed, throwing the papers onto the counter. I shrugged, leaning casually against the back of the couch. I think I'm tired, Rebecca. Tired of the lies, the manipulation, the constant feeling that I have to walk on eggshells around you. So yeah, I'd say it's about time I took control of my own life. Her jaw clenched. You won't get away with this. I laughed at that. Get away with what? Divorcing my cheating, manipulative wife? I'm not the one who emptied our joint account behind my back. I'm not the one who lied about business trips that were actually weekends away with, what was his name again? Oh right, Jason. Her eyes widened for a split second before narrowing into a glare. You had me followed? I shook my head. Didn't need to. You're not as careful as you think, Rebecca. You got sloppy. She scoffed and crossed her arms. Fine. You want a divorce? You got it. But I'll make sure you regret every second of it. I let out a long sigh. See, that's the problem with you. Even now, when it's all falling apart, you still think you have some kind of power over me. But you don't. I pointed toward the door. So go ahead. Pack your things. The sooner you're out of my house, the better. Her lips curled into a sneer. You can't just kick me out. I smirked. Actually, I can. My name is the only one on the deed. Remember? And thanks to my lawyer, there's already a temporary restraining order in place. You've got 48 hours to leave. The look on her face was priceless. Pure, unfiltered rage. She opened her mouth, probably to scream some insult, but I cut her off. Oh, and don't bother trying to take anything that isn't yours. I've already inventoried everything in the house. If anything goes missing, it's theft. And we both know you don't need another criminal charge. That hit home. I could see the realization settle in. She had lost. Completely. Without another word, she turned on her heel and stomped upstairs. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. She would do what she always did. Throw a fit, break something expensive, and then leave in a dramatic huff. But for the first time in our marriage, I didn't care. She could scream, she could threaten, she could hate me all she wanted. It was over, and I had won. The house felt different the moment Rebecca was gone. For years, it had been a battlefield, every corner filled with memories of arguments, deceit, and manipulation. But now, standing in the middle of the living room, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. I spent the next few weeks reclaiming my space, not just physically but emotionally. I threw out the expensive but meaningless decorations she had insisted on, repainted the walls, and replaced the furniture that felt more like hers than mine. It was a cleansing, a way of purging her presence from my life. At first, it felt strange. The silence was almost unsettling. No more slammed doors, no more sarcastic remarks thrown my way. But as the days passed, I began to embrace it. I reconnected with old friends, people I had lost touch with because of Rebecca's controlling nature. Turned out that I wasn't as alone as I thought. My best friend, Mike, invited me to a fishing trip, something I hadn't done in years. Sitting by the lake, beer in hand, I realized how much of myself I had lost during my marriage. One evening, While scrolling through my phone, I noticed a message from someone unexpected, Officer Melissa Carter. She had been the one to arrest Rebecca the night of the garage incident. We had exchanged a few words that night, but I never expected to hear from her again. Melissa, hey, just checking in. I know divorces can be rough. Hope you're holding up okay. I hesitated before replying. It had been a while since someone had genuinely asked about my well-being. Me, hey, thanks. Honestly, it's been weird, but I'm getting through it. Melissa, good to hear. If you ever need a distraction, I know a great place that serves the best ribs in town. Was she asking me out? I smirked, shaking my head. Life really had a way of surprising you. Me, I'll take you up on that. When are you free? Melissa and I met at a small barbecue place on the edge of town. It wasn't anything fancy, but it had a warm, welcoming atmosphere. The smell of smoked ribs filled the air as I stepped inside, spotting her at a corner booth. She was out of uniform, dressed casually in jeans and a leather jacket. The difference was striking. That night, she wasn't the tough, no-nonsense officer who had arrested Rebecca. She was just Melissa, a woman who had been through her own struggles. Didn't think you'd actually show up? She teased as I sat down. I smirked. What can I say? I was promised the best ribs in town. She chuckled, signaling the waiter. Then I hope you're hungry. The conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about everything. Our past relationships, the mistakes we had made, and what we had learned from them. Melissa's marriage had ended a year before mine. Her ex-husband had been controlling, though in a different way than Rebecca. He was emotionally distant, always prioritizing work over their marriage until there was nothing left to salvage. By the time we finished eating, I realized something. For the first time in a long time, I was enjoying someone's company without feeling like I was walking on eggshells. There were no mind games, no hidden agendas, just two people getting to know each other. As we left the restaurant, Melissa glanced at me with a grin. So, did I live up to my promise? Best ribs in town. I pretended to think for a moment before nodding. I'll admit, they were pretty damn good. She laughed. Good, because next time you're picking the place. Next time. I liked the sound of that. Our dates became a regular thing. Sometimes we went to quiet diners, sometimes to the shooting range, and occasionally we just took long walks in the park, talking about everything and nothing. It was refreshing. With Melissa, I didn't have to overthink every word or action. She was direct, honest, and didn't play games. One night, about 4 months into dating, she invited me over to her place. It was a modest home, smaller than the one I shared with Rebecca, but it had a warmth to it that made me feel comfortable the moment I stepped inside. She handed me a beer and plopped down on the couch beside me. So, you ever thought about what comes next? She asked, looking at me over the rim of her bottle. I exhaled slowly. You mean with us? She nodded. I hesitated, but only for a moment. Yeah, I have. Melissa studied me for a long second, then smirked. Good, because I don't do things halfway. If we're doing this, I need to know we're on the same page. I met her gaze. We are. That was the moment everything changed. The next year was the happiest I had been in a long time. I sold the house I had shared with Rebecca. Too many bad memories there. Melissa and I found a place together. A cozy little house with a big backyard. We built a life together, one that felt real, stable. And then, one evening, I found myself standing in the middle of that backyard, ring in hand, looking at the woman who had given me a second chance at happiness. Melissa? I started, my voice steady but my heart pounding. I've spent too much of my life with the wrong person. Now I want to spend the rest of it with the right one. She stared at me wide-eyed. Are you? I dropped to one knee. Marry me. For the first time since I'd met her, I saw Melissa speechless. But then, a slow, radiant smile spread across her face. Yeah, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, I will. Our wedding was nothing like my first. No grand halls, no over-the-top decorations, no unnecessary drama. Just close friends, family, and a quiet ceremony by the lake. Melissa looked stunning in a simple white dress, her hair tied back in a loose bun. I stood at the altar, feeling something I hadn't in a long time, peace. When she walked down the aisle, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. The years that followed were nothing short of incredible. We built a life together, full of laughter, trust, and mutual respect. Unlike my first marriage, I never felt like I was walking on eggshells. With Melissa, everything was easy, natural. We traveled, explored new places, and created memories that I wouldn't trade for anything. She pushed me to be better, to step out of my comfort zone, and in return, I gave her the stability she had never found in her past relationships. A few years in, we welcomed our first child, a daughter. Holding her in my arms, I realized how different my life had become. I wasn't the same man who had once been trapped in a toxic marriage, always second-guessing himself. I was free, happy, and for the first time in my life, truly at peace. Rebecca, on the other hand, was a different story. I heard about her every now and then through old acquaintances. She remarried twice, each relationship ending in disaster. From what I gathered, her second husband had managed to keep her in check for a while, but eventually things fell apart, just like they always did. But by then, I no longer cared. Letting go of my resentment wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Holding on to the past would have only kept me stuck in a cycle of bitterness, and I refused to let her control even a second more of my life. So I moved on, and it was the best decision I ever made. Now, standing here years later, watching my daughter walk down the aisle at her own wedding, I can't help but feel that life has come full circle. Melissa squeezes my hand gently, smiling up at me. "Are you happy?" she whispers. I glance at my daughter, at the life we've built, at the woman beside me who changed everything. And for the first time in a long time, I don't hesitate. "Yeah," I say, my voice filled with certainty. "I really am."